Press Here is available as a podcast on iTunes.
Welcome back to Press Here. The Trump administration is in the middle of changing the rules on H-1B visas so that more Americans get work, particularly in high tech. But high tech says the industry can't find enough qualified Americans and has to look elsewhere for talent. Yet, we do know of qualified American engineers that claim they can't find a job. So which is it? We found ourselves one of Silicon Valley's top headhunters, a former high-tech head of HR, to answer those questions for us. Steve Cadigan is the former head of talent at LinkedIn. I'm guessing you hired a couple of engineers in your day.
Many hundreds of them, yes. Yes.
So, we don't have to dwell on it, but let's talk about this H-1B thing for a minute.
Sure.
Is it true that a high-tech company cannot find enough qualified American workers, and speaking in high-tech, of course, in this day and age?
I think the way most organizations in the Valley look at this is that they want to find the best talent in the world. And that's what really the draw is for Silicon Valley. It's not just American workers, it's the best talent that they can possibly find. And H-1Bs have existed for decades. And I think if we take a look at who some of those H-1Bs turned into, people like Satya Nadella, people like
I'm not disagreeing, but it's an interesting, you put an interesting shade to that, and that is that, or spin on that, which is, it's not necessarily we can't find the Americans, but we could find even better, more qualified people somewhere else.
Right.
In certain situations.
That's right. I think that's the goal, is to find the best talent in the world, because most of your products are going to reach people around the world too. So you want as diverse a talented organization as possible. And every organization that I consult with today, or that I was competing against for talent when I was at LinkedIn, is really trying to find super talent, and the supply is really limited.
And so what happens if the number of the H-1B cap at the moment, is it 85,000, something like that?
Something like
85,000,
right.
including the 20,000.
If that comes down, what happens to the companies around us here in Silicon Valley? Will there be an immediate impact on their products and business?
Well, I've got to say, from the people I'm talking to, already people are making plans to find second sources, second locations, different, and that's existed for a long time.
Are those in Canada and Mexico, or are they all over the world?
In part, all the companies that the big name companies, Facebook and Microsoft, have, some of them call them sort of like holding places. But I think the bigger issue is that the fear of international talent, international technical talent right now is, do I really want to go to the U.S. for an education? Because I may not be able to get an H-1B. And that, I think, is we're cutting our our nose off to spite our face. And I think it's a very risky strategy long term, because look at the value that's created by having great global talent here.
Well, that's the thing too. So somebody comes here on H-1B visa, they do a good job, they start their own company. So for every person who comes here with an H-1B visa, that actually equates to more like 2.7 to 3 jobs. I mean, they're not only doing well here, but they're also creating another large
and that's a great, the term I think of is force multiplier. Mm-hmm. You've got people that are innovators and pioneers that are going to create more jobs for other things. And the best industry to take a look at that, for an example, would be the travel industry. So it used to be tons of travel agents. Well, then all of a sudden, online booking, and then TripAdvisor, and then Yelp, and all these other sites came. And so there's thousands of new jobs created in the travel industry, Airbnb too. But the travel agents, their work has been impacted significantly.
Right. But there's also another view of the H-1B employees. I mean, there are stories about software engineers at companies in America who were asked to train H-1B employees that took over their job at a lower salary, right? I mean, a lot of the H-1Bs, I think most H-1Bs go to outsourcing companies, right?
Like Tata.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's necessarily true, and I've not heard the stories that you've heard around people training H-1Bs.
They've been widely reported.
Really?
They've been widely reported.
Well, the math doesn't add up regardless of how you look at it. I think if you look at the various estimates, it's 500,000 to 1 million unfilled computing jobs in the next couple of years. Meanwhile, you've got this maybe a lower number than 85,000 for H-1Bs. So you're creating this situation where you actually either have to retrain Americans who are here in their skill sets, which we see through co-working locations, or through coding programs. I mean, is that probably what's going to happen regardless?
Yes, I think that the trend is that technology is changing faster than our ability to upskill the talent to drive the necessary skills to build, the technical competency that organizations need. And what the discussion in Silicon Valley has been more around technical talent, like high-tech jobs. But honestly, there's more non-high-tech jobs whose jobs are being transformed because of digitization.
Well, there's like the legacy companies too, like the banks or healthcare. who are already well established in the U.S., that they're really keen to cybersecurity and other payment systems. So they need people who have skills in those areas. So is this, the irony to me is that the Trump administration on one hand wants to create jobs, but in a sense they're already here, but they might be leaving because of the H1B stance.
It could be. I think even non-technical jobs like things like digital marketing, I think it's really hard to find those people. If you go onto Facebook's site right now, or even Apple, each company has about 400 openings for digital marketeers, which would suggest like there's a huge need for that.
I was going to ask you that if I'm a young college student planning to work in Silicon Valley. I mean, you've got your finger on the pulse of where the jobs are. Is it digital marketing? I mean, that kind of sounds like the guy who runs Twitter, but not running Twitter, the CEO, but the Twitter guy at the company. I mean, where are the hot jobs?
I think right now the best skills that a new graduate could be really focused on is making themselves an open system of constantly learning and being very agile.
Where's the skill? I mean, I can only learn so many skills. Where's my skill that I
think
need to
being
learn?
digitally fluent, understanding social networks, understanding user experience, understanding like so many consumers and people in the world are consuming and transacting through a mobile device. So mobile developers or people that understand how mobile works and influences jobs, super powerful.
Do you think like some of the tech companies are too picky though on who they want or who they think are qualified to work for their jobs? Because one of the criticisms against a Facebook or a Google was that they only recruited from maybe 10 colleges in the US. They wouldn't consider anybody beyond that.
That's hard to argue. I remember facing my board at LinkedIn after we just hired 1,000 people and them saying, there's no way you've hired 1,000 superstars. We know you haven't. And we're like, no, we've been very discriminating and trying to focus as well as we can. But that's the pride that they have, is that we are discriminating. It takes 100 candidates for us to find one. And I don't think they're going to change their approach to that.
Thank you for being with us this morning. We have to do a commercial to pay the bills.